That emptiness you feel isn't a lack, it's energy with nowhere to go. And when energy can't move, it doesn't stay neutral. It turns inward and starts working against you. It shows up as procrastination, numbness, scrolling, or the sense that life is happening somewhere else. Jung called it a loss of psychic energy, libido, not just sexual, but vital. Have you ever felt as if you had everything you needed to act? Time, ability, even opportunity, yet inside you still felt switched off, as if the spark, the appetite, the fire had gone. In Jung's view, that void isn't a biological defect, it's a problem of inner physics. He believed the psyche isn't just memory or trauma or thought. It's a living energy system, governed by laws that are invisible but exact. That energy explains why you obsess, why you repeat patterns, why you sink, and also how you can change. In this video, you'll see how that energy gets blocked, how it loops back into the past, and how it can be redirected into creation, purpose, and quiet power. You are not empty. You are disconnected from your own force. And Jung drew a map to switch it on again. There is a very clear difference between a body that is breathing and something inanimate. And there is an equally clear difference between a person overflowing with projects and someone walking through the world feeling empty, as if they were missing the most basic fuel. Jung's claim is that this difference isn't explained by medicine or by isolated biological processes, and it isn't just imaginary either. It's what he called the sap of the psyche. In his view, the mind carries its own kind of electricity, a current that decides what we pay attention to, why we become obsessed with an idea, and why interest can suddenly switch off in something that once mattered deeply. The change can feel abrupt, but for Jung, it has an inner logic. To understand that force, we have to see that Jung did not treat it as separate from biology. He argued that psychic energy is a branch of a much wider vital energy that animates every living being. Mind and body form a unit. The same current flows through different channels. That is why an emotional blockage can show up as real physical exhaustion. The energy is one system, and if it stagnates in one place, the rest of the system feels it. When one channel is jammed, the whole economy of the person shifts. In the early 20th century, psychology went through a debate that changed how we understand ourselves. On one side, Sigmund Freud argued that this inner motor, which he called libido, had a root that was almost exclusively sexual. For Freud, whenever we do something creative or important, we are often taking an alternative route for that basic biological desire. Jung felt that view was limited. Reducing the whole of human experience to a single impulse, he thought, is like trying to explain the ocean by speaking only about the surface waves. You can describe what is visible, but you miss what is driving the whole system underneath. The surface is real, but it isn't the whole story. Jung saw libido differently. For him, it was a generalized vital energy that pushes us to grow and to understand the environment. He saw this as an idea with deep roots. Thinkers from ancient China, such as Lao Tzu, philosophers like Plato, and later minds such as Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, all tried to name the inner passion that moves us from within. Even scientists like Mesmer spoke of a fluid that passes through us and connects us with reality. Jung's point is not that these figures all meant the same thing, but that many traditions tried to describe a similar inner force. To visualize his model, imagine your mind works like a solar system. In this inner universe, there are different objects. Your sense of identity, the I, and the sensitive zones Jung called complexes. What keeps these elements in place, orbiting without crashing into each other, is precisely this energy. It is an invisible physics that dictates how parts of your personality attract or repel one another. When that force flows in a balanced way, we feel in harmony with our own orbit, steady, oriented, and internally coherent. This power is not static, it is dynamic. It flows and transforms constantly. When you feel full of life and motivated, it's because this sap is moving through your structures with ease. The great mystery appears when that energy stops flowing outward into life and starts to pull back. Because this force does not move at random. Just as water seeks the path of least resistance, our inner energy responds to precise laws. There is a hidden mechanics that helps determine why today you feel unable to get off the sofa, or why your mind becomes trapped in an event from years ago. The same power that drives the building of great works is the power that can sink us into absolute silence when it loses its direction. To understand how this vital force is actually distributed, Jung asks us to look at a concept he called value. He does not mean value as a moral judgment or an ethical badge. He means it as an exact measure of emotional intensity. The question is obvious. How do you measure something as invisible as human interest? Jung's answer is practical and revealing. Take an honest inventory. Look at where your money goes, what you give your time to, and, most importantly, where your attention slips when you are not consciously watching it. He draws a sharp distinction between subjective value and objective value. Subjective value is what you claim matters to you, what you believe you care about, what you say you prioritize. Objective value is the amount of real energy a content is consuming in the shadowy background of the unconscious. Very often, what we value most in words is precisely what receives the least psychic sap in practice. Your mouth can praise one thing whilst your energy, quietly, is feeding another. To show this mechanism in a more scientific way, Jung developed the word association experiment. This method becomes a kind of proof that complexes behave like magnetic knots of energy. If you hear a word and hesitate noticeably before responding, if you make an odd mistake, if your voice changes, if your pulse shifts, then you have stumbled into a complex that is, in that moment, kidnapping your libido. The delay is not random noise. It is the psyche showing you where the current is being pulled. That discovery allows a shift in how you interpret problems. Instead of staying inside a strictly causal, mechanic view, always asking why the machine failed in the past, Jung points to a more energetic, goal-directed frame. The question becomes, what is the energy trying to do right now? Not only, what old wound caused this, but towards what purpose is the psyche attempting to mobilize? It looks not just for an ancient fault, but for an evolutionary aim, for a direction the psyche is trying to take in order to resolve a conflict in the present. Jung treats the psyche as a closed system operating under a conservation principle. The energy is not destroyed. It changes form, or it changes location, moving along gradients of intensity, much like heat flows from a hotter body to a cooler one. When that movement helps you adapt to life's demands and mature, Jung calls it progression. In progression, life flows with meaning. Mental sap moves outward into the world. Your will aligns with your daily actions. You feel, in a clean sense, that you are the rightful owner of your vitality. But life also places obstacles in front of us that demand deep transformation. Changes we may resist out of fear or inertia. When we hit a barrier that feels impossible, the forward flow can stop abruptly. Jung asks you to imagine a river meeting an unbreakable dam. The water does not vanish. The pressure remains. It accumulates, presses against the wall, and searches for cracks. often deeper channels that run backward and downward. If the energy cannot move forward to meet the challenge, it begins to retreat. This is regression. In Jung's description, regression activates layers of infant memory and pulls us towards a magnetic territory that promises absolute safety in the past. The psyche reaches for earlier solutions, earlier comforts, earlier identities, and this withdrawal is not a simple rest. It can mark the start of a dangerous descent, the gradual dissolving of the conscious adult position, as vitality is pulled away from the present and invested in what once was. If you want to know where your life energy is going, Jung's answer is blunt. Don't ask only what you think you value. Watch where the energy actually goes. Maturing, in essence, is a process of constant wear. Life pushes us to make decisions, to hold responsibilities, and to meet reality using our own resources. It demands that we choose, commit, endure, and keep moving, even when comfort disappears. Yet there is a silent force that works in the opposite direction. When the obstacles of the present overwhelm us, our vital energy begins to withdraw from the outer world, as if it were pulling its investment back. This retreat is more than simple rest. It is not the healthy pause that restores strength. It appears as a return into the depths of our personal history, a movement that drifts away from the present and towards earlier psychological ground. Jung observed that this movement draws us, almost inevitably, towards the paradise of childhood irresponsibility, a time when the child lives under absolute shelter, with no unmet needs, free from the weight of individual consciousness. In that early condition, life is carried for you. You do not have to face the world alone. At this point, Jung distanced himself from Freud's view of incest. For Freud, the wish was a literal biological tendency. Jung read it as a symbol. For him, the incest longing represents the thirst to be protected again, the hunger to return to the maternal womb as a refuge from the demands of adult life. More than seeking the physical mother, we yearn for the peace of total unconsciousness that she represented in our earliest days. We long for the state where nothing is required of us, and where responsibility has not yet appeared. It is a psychic inertia that tempts us to abandon the struggle and dissolve into the safety of the past. This magnetism sits behind many destructive behaviors, especially addiction. Excessive use of substances can become a desperate attempt to recreate that state of not being, to switch off the mind so we do not feel the pressure of existence. The aim is not growth, but relief. Relief from tension, from decision, from having to carry a self. Jung also clarifies something crucial about the beginning. Libido first seeks the mother's body, because nourishment is essential for the infant's survival. At that stage, there is no erotism. There is only pure vital need for sustenance and warmth. The infant's attachment is survival before it is anything else. Closeness as safety, contact as life. The problem appears when, in adulthood, that energy remains stuck in early fixations. If we fail to move that force towards new aims, we become slaves to a past that consumes us. A person can get trapped in a cycle of immaturity, expecting others to act as permanent providers of safety. They wait to be carried again, as if life owed them shelter. It becomes a state of paralysis. Energy that should build and move forward degrades through lack of creative use. The same power that could have shaped a life turns into stagnation, and the person remains suspended, unable to advance. To break this loop, Jung argued that human nature contains a sophisticated evolutionary tool that forces our basic impulses to transform. It does not allow energy to remain forever in infant solutions without consequence. Moving forward demands courage. It means accepting that the childhood refuge must die so the adult can be born. Jung spoke of this as an essential sacrifice of the will. Far from being a punishment, it is an inner law of growth. If energy is to flow towards the future, we must give up the fantasy of eternal protection. The process is painful because it requires letting go of the hand that guided us and stepping into life with our own strength. But here Jung points to what he calls the miracle of the human psyche. When we refuse to retreat and accept the challenge of reality, the mind generates something new. It does not do this through brute force. It relies on a language capable of directing instinct towards higher aims. Our energy finds an unexpected outlet through a system of symbolic translation, turning primitive impulses into meaningful visions. The raw drive does not vanish. It is redirected into a form the adult can live. Jung was convinced that human nature tends towards the formation of culture and the creation of symbols, so that energy can flow into higher mental contents. For him, culture is the satisfaction of desire, not its obstruction. It is the natural goal of libido once libido has learned to transform itself, rather than remaining a mere substitute for sexual fulfillment. Culture, in this sense, becomes a destination for energy, a way of building meaning, structure, and direction from the same original force. The symbolic system is not an intellectual invention. It is a biological response of the psyche, a way of not dying in inertia. It is the engine that converts the desire to return into the will to create worlds. The great challenge we face now is to understand how the mind performs this translation automatically, using images with the power to move mountains inside us. For the energy to stop dragging us back into the past, the mind activates a mechanism of astonishing sophistication. Jung found that we are not condemned to repeat childhood patterns forever, because we carry an innate capacity to redirect our vitality. This transformation happens through what he called analogy. Imagine the mind can recognize a functional resemblance between a basic biological need and a higher mental activity. It is not about making clever comparisons for their own sake. In Jung's view, it is a real psychological process. Energy finds a new track to run along. It shifts away from the primitive channel and begins building something with distinctly human meaning, something that can be lived, shared, and sustained. One of Jung's clearest examples is hunting. At the beginning of our species, hunting was a direct response to hunger, a blunt survival need. It was practical, immediate, and urgent. Find food or suffer. But over time, human beings began surrounding the act with ritual, dance, and symbol. The same energy that once served only to secure food started to change its form. Hunting became art, a test of courage, a proof of status, or a bridge to what a group considered sacred. In Jung's language, this is desexualization. The original instinctive charge is reduced, and the aim is lifted. The energy no longer seeks only the physical prey. It seeks excellence, honor, initiation, right. The mind has created an analogy that allows vital force to flow into culture rather than remain trapped in raw necessity. At this stage of his work, Jung received an influence that often stays in the shadows, Sabine Spielrein. She argued that there is a necessary duality inside our energy. For something new to be born, something old must be destroyed. Jung initially absorbed Spielrein's idea of a death will, then refined it into a crucial distinction. It is not a literal desire for death. It is the requirement that an old form of the self must be broken for psychic renewal to occur, so the psyche can reorganize rather than fossilize. It becomes a constant cycle of symbolic creation and symbolic destruction. Without that cycle, the mind turns into stagnant water, the same forms repeating, the same habits hardening, Libido has two directions. One that wants to preserve what we already are, and another that forces us to break our structures so we can reach a higher level of consciousness. The psyche has to move between the two, conserving enough to remain coherent, breaking enough to become new. That tension is not a flaw, it is the engine of development. This is also where Jung separates himself from Freud again. Freud tended to treat culture as a poor substitute for repressed wishes. Jung argued the opposite. Culture is the natural destination of our energy and the true satisfaction of it. When libido turns towards art, it is not being deceived. It is fulfilling its aim. The symbol is not a mask that hides a real desire. It is a transformer of energy, capable of changing both direction and level. When you feel moved by a work of art, or when you devote yourself to a social cause, Jung would not call that a distraction. He would say, your libido is reaching an evolutionary purpose. Human nature is shaped to produce symbols because symbols are the only containers capable of holding and directing our immense inner power towards creative goals. Without symbols, the force remains blind. With symbols, it can be steered. This capacity for symbolic translation is what allows us to stop being animals driven purely by instinct and become creators of realities. When the psyche finds an image that truly resonates within a force, energy stops pressing from the unconscious like a threat. It begins to work in our favor. It gains direction, form, and intelligibility, so it can build rather than merely demand. But Jung also points to a practical problem. Even the strongest symbol does not solve everything by itself, because libido is still a current that needs a steady, everyday channel. If we do not give it a practical outlet through action, that inner fire risks becoming erratic. Potential accumulates, pressure builds, and the system overheats, so a symbol may point the direction, but it still needs a daily structure to hold it. Without structure, the current leaks into agitation, fantasy, or self-sabotage, simply to discharge. That is why, in Jung's view, growth requires more than insight. It requires a container, rhythm, limits, and a discipline that keeps the engine from revving until it breaks. Not discipline as punishment, but discipline as a channel, so energy can move forward steadily into life. All this talk of symbols and transformed energy can sound inspiring, but it carries a real danger, staying in the realm of ideas and never landing in lived reality. For Jung, if that current of vitality is left without a clear outlet, it doesn't remain harmless. It can build into an inner storm that overwhelms you. That is why he treats one tool as fundamental for mental health: work. Most people see daily effort as a heavy burden, an obligation that steals freedom. Jung turns that around. From the physics of the psyche, work serves a vital function. It acts as a release valve, a safe channel that prevents excess energy from accumulating inside you until it starts doing damage. When you accept a duty or give yourself to a task with discipline, you are building a stable root for libido. Jung argued that socially useful work protects us from the suction force we described earlier, the inertia that pulls energy back towards the absolute irresponsibility of childhood. If you leave your energy stagnant, with no clear aim in the outer world, it doesn't vanish. It begins feeding fantasies, old fears, and emotional regressions. The pressure grows in the background. Conscious effort does something simple and powerful. It drains that pressure. It reduces the constant pull the unconscious can exert over you when the current has nowhere to go. Jung's image is almost engineering. It's like opening the gates of a dam at the right moment, so the stored water doesn't eventually break the walls of your stability. Without that outlet, the same libido turns inward. It rehearses old scenes. inflates worries, and searches for rescue. Work anchors it in the present until the deeper sacrifice finally comes. In Jung's view, work is not a punishment for losing the childhood paradise. It is the mechanism that makes real emancipation possible. When you place your attention and your value into something external and concrete, you force the psychic sap to come out of hiding and manifest in the shared world. That stops energy from being wasted in the isolation of laziness or in the unconscious wish to be cared for forever by external figures. It doesn't matter whether the work is complex and creative or simple and routine. What matters to the psyche is the act of directing the will towards a productive end. The difference is like a controlled fire that warms a home versus an erratic blaze that consumes the house because it has no direction. But Jung also points to a limit. Daily discipline can carry you far, and you can be productive in the eyes of others. Yet there is often a region of the mind that resists final change. We carry heavy baggage, an old identity that refuses to loosen its grip. Even with the engine running and the channel open, we can reach an invisible barrier, one that demands a deeper renunciation than effort alone. So work is necessary, but it is not always sufficient. It stabilizes the current, drains the pressure, and keeps the psyche from sliding backwards. Yet sooner or later you meet the deeper question. What part of you is still clinging to total control? What old self is being protected? And what would have to be surrendered for transformation to become complete? We've reached the point where daily discipline is no longer enough to carry you all the way. There is an invisible boundary between the person who simply completes their tasks and the person who has truly transformed their life at the root. That boundary is sacrifice. We often hear the word and think of suffering or giving up something valuable because society demands it. But in the physics of inner energy, sacrifice has a deeper and more vital meaning. It is the voluntary act of letting a part of you die so that another part, more capable, more conscious, can take its rightful place in the world. It is not loss for its own sake. It is the price of becoming real. The resistance you feel whenever real change approaches is not just laziness. It is the weight of an identity that refuses to disappear. The infantile part of the psyche, the part that longs for total protection and freedom from consequences, does not withdraw quietly. It clings to the present through irrational fears and a steady inertia that whispers, "You are not ready to walk on your own." It bargains. It delays. It insists that tomorrow will be safer than today and that risk can always be postponed. Jung argued that morality and ethics are not merely external commands designed to punish instinct. In his view, they operate as natural functions of energy trying to evolve. They arise from within, as expressions of growth, rather than as cages imposed from outside. The human psyche carries an intrinsic impulse to surpass itself, in the same way a seed breaks its shell in order to become a tree. The shell is not bad. It is simply no longer enough. The same is true of an old identity that once protected you, but now limits you. For that transformation to happen in reality, you have to face a truth most people avoid. You cannot keep the best of both worlds. You cannot enjoy adult freedom while still demanding the infant's absolute safety. This is the true sacrifice of the will. Jung saw this process as one of the clearest marks of the human being. Other biological impulses push for immediate satisfaction. Human energy can restrain itself, contain itself, and wait in order to reach something higher. It can tolerate tension instead of escaping it. It can choose what is difficult now because it carries a larger meaning later. That restraint does not arise only from fear of punishment. Jung rejects the idea that we become ethical solely because we are threatened. He frames it as biological wisdom, an inner intelligence that recognizes the danger of stagnation. It knows that refusing to grow does not preserve life. It slowly poisons it. It keeps energy trapped in forms that cannot carry it forward. When we avoid this necessary sacrifice, energy stagnates and begins to degrade. It gets trapped in older channels that no longer match our current reality or our present needs. Life starts to feel small, tight, and airless. Symptoms appear, physical or emotional, that we cannot explain rationally. The discomfort is the cry of a vitality that wants to be released but cannot find an outlet because we keep gripping the comfortable refuge of childhood. We keep demanding protection without paying the cost of independence. The moment you accept the pain of letting go, the pressure changes its nature. When you release the past, energy that was locked in resistance becomes available, sometimes for the first time in years. The force you spent defending yourself against growth is suddenly free. It is no longer fuel for avoidance. It becomes fuel for action. What used to drain you now returns as capacity, and that is the turning point. Once you stop fighting your own maturation, existence offers a wider stage. The impulses that once frightened you find a purpose larger than your personal comfort. They begin to connect you to something collective, what Jung calls culture, the shared human work that takes raw energy and gives it form, meaning, and direction. In that movement, sacrifice stops looking like deprivation and starts looking like initiation, the door you pass through when you finally choose the adult life that has been waiting for you. When we cross the threshold of personal sacrifice, the energy that was blocked or retreating into the past finally finds its true purpose. This is where Jung's vision breaks away from almost every theory around him and draws a clear line towards fulfillment. For many thinkers, including Freud, culture and great human works were treated as substitutes. On that view, if we cannot satisfy our most basic biological desires directly, we settle for painting a picture, writing a book, building a philosophy, or adopting a spiritual belief. Civilization becomes a kind of consolation prize, a sophisticated way to cope with the frustration of being instinct-driven creatures who cannot always get what they want. Jung rejected that interpretation. He broke with it in a radical, courageous way. He argued that culture is not the obstruction of desire and not a poor replacement for what we really wanted. Culture, for Jung, is the true satisfaction of desire at its proper destination. Libido, the vital sap that runs through us, first seeks nourishment in the mother's body, because survival comes before anything else. Later, it moves into the channels of sexuality, so life can continue. Those are the earliest gradients of existence, the first tracks along which energy naturally flows. But the journey does not end there. Jung's claim is that human nature is built so this force can evolve further, until it finds a higher analogy, a spiritual image, an idea, a living symbol that gives deep meaning to everything else. The libido is not being cheated when it rises. It is doing what it was meant to do, transforming, refining, and aiming at something larger than immediate need. A concrete example of this mechanism is the role of major religious structures. For Jung, systems such as Mithraism or Christianity are not merely sets of beliefs people cling to out of fear. They are sophisticated engines of transformation. Their symbols act as necessary containers. They hold immense inner power without letting it explode, and they channel it towards spiritual, social, and sometimes political aims. Without such symbolic structures, energy does not simply disappear. It disperses without direction, or it turns inward and burns the person from the inside through the anxiety of emptiness. Culture is therefore the space where the mind's electricity stops being a danger and becomes steady light. To become the owner of this inner fire is to recognize that we can steer it consciously towards goals that outlast our individual comfort and even our individual life. We are no longer leaves blown around by complexes or pulled backwards by the suction force of childhood. We begin to understand the laws of our inner universe. Energy is conserved. It needs daily channels of effort, and it demands sacrifice if it is not to stagnate and degrade. Discipline stops looking like a prison and starts looking like a channel, an everyday structure that keeps the current moving in the right direction. In the end, the peace we seek is not simply the absence of tension. It is the certainty that our vitality is flowing into something worth building. That is the shift Jung points to, from being driven by our own force to directing it. We stop being slaves of our energy and become the architects of meaning inside the human inner world. And that concludes our video. If you enjoyed the content as much as we did, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future videos. And don't forget to turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our updates. Thanks for being part of our community. See you in the next video.